I remember reading an article when I was about 12 years old, I think it might have been in Scientific American, where they measured the efficiency of locomotion for all these species on planet Earth. How many kilocalories did they expend to get from point A to point B? And the condor one came in at the top of the list, surpassed everything else, and humans came in about a third of the way down the list, which was not such a great showing for the crown of creation. And but somebody there had the imagination to test the efficiency of a human riding a bicycle. Human riding a bicycle blew away the condor, all the way off the top of the list. And it made a really big impression on me that we humans are tool builders, and that we can fashion tools that amplify these inherent abilities that we have to spectacular magnitudes. And so for me, a computer has always been a bicycle of the mind. Something that takes us far beyond our inherent abilities. And I think we're just at the early stages of this tool, very early stages. And we've come only a very short distance. And it's still in its formation, but already we've seen enormous changes. I think that's nothing compared to what's coming in the next 100 years.
Great. Thank you. If we can just move on to the first slide, or I'll move us on. So it's great to be here, everyone. My name's Andrew Davies. Thank you for the very kind and generous introduction, Jay. I am going to cover quite a few things. Some of them have been covered before, so I'm going to move through those quite quickly. But I'm going to try and keep it practical. Like we've talked about the visionary stuff. I actually couldn't resist just bringing that Steve Jobs video up. When I listened to all the Jobs talk, I actually went back to AV and said, listen, please just include it. Because I just find it super inspiring, and I think it's a wonderful way to think about how humans engage with technology as a bicycle for the mind. The reality is that bicycle might be riding next to us with its hands on the handlebars. Things have changed a little bit. It's got a little bit more autonomy, but I think it's still relevant. So consulting for the AI age, it's an interesting one. Like, I've built a few businesses, and I phoned my dad. I said, hey, Dad, I'm starting this new consulting business, right? And he's like, are you starting a consulting business in the age of AI? It's the first thing he said to me. And I explored the question myself, of course. But the essence of it is I really wanted to be at the cutting edge. So my role, and I'm not going to go into detail about my history, I want to get into the nitty-gritty of trying to give you some of my insights. But my role in this business is to take businesses through this process of AI adoption. So it's what I live, it's what I breathe. I'm very passionate about strategy, but I'm particularly passionate about execution, because without execution, strategy is absolutely irrelevant. Without execution, there's no impact, and that's why I'm here, quite frankly. The one thing that I will say, though, is I'm a bit of a survivalist. I've been in that crying corner that I think Craig Wing talked about many times, lots of arrows in the back. But I have I had the benefit, or whatever you want to call it, of actually surviving the tsunami. I was in Thailand, and I absolutely believe with every cell in my body that this is a super cycle, the likes of which we've never seen, and I won't go into the detail of that because I think it's been adequately covered. But this is quite an interesting one, and it's the truth. I deal with a lot of businesses and retail, financial services, and everyone wants this thing, but they don't quite know what they want, and they don't quite know how. So today, between my session and the session that I'm going to do with what's Tanya's session, but I'm going to facilitate, we're going to try and actually unpack that and scrape below the surface. Any questions that you have, please put them on the WhatsApp channel, and we'll try and address those as well. So just to give you a sense of how we think, and this is actually the way that I purged this from Art of Scale, but this is the way that Art of Scale thinks about the path to strategic transformation, and I think it's a super helpful way of thinking about your level of maturity. I had a call yesterday with probably one of the leading asset managers in the country, and they were asking me, like, where's the industry at? And the truth is, a lot of people are talking about tactical wins, but globally, where the industry is was between 2 and 4. Okay, that's true for SMEs, that's true for startups, and it's true for large enterprises and the mid-tier. But essentially, the goal is strategic transformation. I think there's also an assumption perhaps made earlier that a lot of businesses in this room are tech businesses. I've tried not to make that assumption. Okay, I'm making the assumption that there are tech businesses here, but there are other businesses, right, where tech is an enabler as opposed to the thing. And when everything's changing, there's old Dr. Rassi, some things actually still say the same, right? It starts with leadership. It's been mentioned severally. You've got to nail the basics. You've got to be a student of the game. Okay. So in this game, okay, and this is true for me as well, I've tried to build this business away to carve out about 3 to 4 hours a day to experiment with the tooling and to experiment with, to consume reading from thought leaders. I do not consider myself a thought leader, but I certainly follow them, and I'd advise everyone to do that. Just go into ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever it is, ask, who are the key thought leaders in this market, and follow them, Substack, LinkedIn, X, whatever it is. So be a student of the game is a key thing, and then make your team extraordinary. We were talking earlier about Wayne Gretzky. He was actually more famous for the number of assists. I think it was in the order of 1,950 assists, more so than goals. So this is the founder of Shopify, a guy called Tobias Lutke. Some of you in the room may have heard of this, but there was a seminal moment in AI when one of the first tech leaders just basically said to his team, listen, if you're not going to become AI first and be all in, then effectively, from my perspective, you're out. Okay, and he talks about the GSD prototype phase. Does anyone know what the GSD is? It's get shit done, okay, which is something that I really believe in. And he was like, if we're not going to operate like this, then as far as I'm concerned, you're not interested as an employee. So for me, that's the first step. And if I leave you with one thought, it's this, right? This is Jason Goldberg. Where's Jason? I hope he's watching. I did this specifically for you. It's this concept of eating your own dog food, right? Which is the traditional context of this is, whatever you sell, you must consume. Okay, you're going to be selling a vision in your businesses of being AI first, right? This thing is a key enabler. You've got to eat your own dog food. You have to experiment. It's the best way to learn how this technology works and fits together. So chow your own dog food. And if I leave you with one thing today, that would be the thing. Experiment. This is a slide again that I purged from Jason. 9 out of 10 for intellectual thought, 5 out of 10 for beauty. But the idea is an AI equation. So as a leader, okay, how do you lead effectively in this age? Okay, so E is effective leadership times F, which is fluency. Okay, it's about you understanding how to use the full capability of these tools, leveraged. So Jason mentioned it earlier, don't focus on the low-value tasks. I'm going to talk about grunt work later. It has an important role to play, but as a leader, focus your energy on the higher-value tasks where you're maximizing your leverage. And then this idea, which actually came from a guy called Ethan Mollick. If you don't follow him, I would advise that you do. He's based out of Wharton, one of the premier thought leaders in the industry. But he talks about habitual co-intelligence, okay, this idea of constantly using the technology to augment and amplify yourself. Right, so AI is a force multiplier. And again, Jason talked about what area of that spectrum, of that plank, do you want to be on? And you want to be right at the end. That's the bottom line. So you need to be using this tooling as a critical thought partner. I saw some data that came out recently from Anthropic. So there was core data coming out of Claude, where the number one use case was critical thought partnership. So if you haven't used the technology as a critical thought partner, like, you need to get on that personally as a leader. Then Cassie Kozerkoff is her name. She's actually an ex-South African. She was the first chief data scientist at Google. Amazing how South Africans have done so well internationally. Talks about chimeric talent, right? The rise of super contributors that you're going to see in your business. Okay, and their ability to operate in adjacent functions. I don't know if any of you have heard of the concept of shadow AI, people holding back how they're using the tooling. Okay, and this becomes very disruptive in organizations, right? Because you get guys that are starting to contribute at a super duper level, and they're also they're enabling themselves to actually operate in adjacent functions. And that's that idea of being able to do more with less. So it absolutely collapses expertise gaps. A chimera is a combination of a serpent, a goat, and a lion. So it's people that can do more than one things. Hiring, we've talked about people, how important those are. Yes, like as startups or scale-ups, we don't get to always employ the people that we would like to, but hiring for AI leverage trumps many other criteria. Okay, when I'm interviewing people today, it's like my first go-to question. Like, I want to know where they are, how they're experimenting, what they're reading, how they feel about it. It gives me a good sense of them. And then this very fancy word that the name of my business, Orchestrate, is based on, which is orchestration, which is just a very fancy word for management. But the difference here is that you're now managing people, and you're managing machines, and you're managing swarms of machines, okay? You've probably heard of swarms of drones. The next shift in agentic AI is swarms of agents that are coordinating across multiple functions. Key part of leadership, communicate this to your people, okay? AI augments, it accelerates, it supports you, it amplifies. So there are some subtle differences between the definitions of the word, but for me, amplification, it's a little bit like a fertilizer, right? It's not just support, it's not just automation. It enables you to do things that you never did before. And then very important, the reason that the market is so excited, and the people in the tech industry and the venture industry will know this, is that the venture market, the hyperscalers, are going after the labor market. It's a $60 trillion market. People are going to get replaced. It's going to happen. Jason made this point earlier that as people do get replaced, there's going to be a time lag issue, and there's going to be some trauma there. So we need to communicate this stuff transparently to our people. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because a lot of the strategic stuff has been covered. I often use this example of the British East India Company. It's not the best politically correct example because they were colonialists. But the way that they controlled the world is that they realized that the world wasn't mapped. And if they could map the world, they could control the world. So they made most of their money by controlling taxation at ports. So there's 2 points here. The one is you've got to figure out what you do, where value is going to concentrate in the future, and how you're going to take advantage of that. So map out your value chain. However you do that, I'd suggest Porter. I'm a little bit old school. And then once you've mapped out those use cases, and Jason Krauser talked to this a little bit earlier, identify those priority use cases that are going to move the needle for you. That's how you start. I don't know if I asked Jason that question earlier about how is he going to defend art of scale against the frontier models. And I thought his answer was brilliant. We've got to start. Okay, you've got to start somewhere. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about that now. Another theme that's come through, I think that, it was so interesting when that Mentimeter came up. 30% of people, the focus was on automation, building. Okay, but there's this technology that already exists, assistants, which are agentic, okay, which do enable you to automate a bunch of stuff that you do and amplify your thinking that's already at your disposal. It's a very low-cost, high ROI piece of technology that you can use right now. And then just this quote by Sundar Pichai, that, it's this thing about augmenting humans is really important. Big deal that I see in businesses all the time, small businesses, big businesses, huge businesses, is that AI reflects the reality of your organization. Okay, if your workflows are problematic, by the way, you're going to have to redesign your workflows in a number of cases, but if your workflows are problematic, it's going to be reflected back. If your data and context is problematic, it's going to be reflected back. You can only take advantage of this multiplier to accelerate what already works. And I'm going to talk to some practical things that I think you need to look at to do that. So don't play with assistants, all the stuff that we've been talking about, but don't build before you map your workflows. When you identify that high return use case or use cases, map your workflows. How do they fit together? Okay, how do they fit together when when things are going well? But what are the edge cases? Because there's always edge cases, right? And we see this a lot. Where are humans in the loop? HITL, one of the many new buzzwords that we were talking about. So map your workflows, really important. Okay, so this is one of Meta's facilities. I think it's like 4 million square foot facility, $10 billion. In Louisiana, I believe. But one of the things that I say to my customers is don't rush to build or buy, okay? A lot of the stuff, and there's been talk about this earlier, building wrappers. Beware of wrappers. Beware of vendors that are selling you stuff, because the chances are that the workspace players, so that's Microsoft and Google, are going to come in and they're going to build that stuff. Because if they don't, they're going to get disrupted. right? So you be careful of adopting new technology, okay? Rather lever the technology that you want to use. So I'm a ChatGPT Pro user. I pay $230 a month for it just because I get such enormous value out of it. And I want to pivot to Gemini, right? And the reason that I want to pivot to Gemini is, for me, all of my context sits there. It's very hard. Ultimately, I will do it. Okay, so that's the other sort of, let's call it pearl of wisdom that I'll impart, is don't rush to build stuff. And you see it there, automation, and people are thinking build. It's not quite there yet. Like, you can afford to wait, but you need to watch and you need to experiment. And then if you are going to build, what do you build, right? So my framework for thinking about this is, if it's what they refer to as your system of record, your system of truth, whether that's your CRM or your database, and it relates to generic productivity, please just buy. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. Okay? If it's a source of innovation or differentiation, by all means, look at it, okay? But look at it in an agile way and partner with the right people. There was a gentleman here, I can't see him earlier, he was talking about the MIT survey on the 95% failure rate. One of the things that I love to say at the time, but I'll say it now, is look at the 5% that were successful. Okay, look at the 67% of people that were successful because they partnered with the right company to enable them to deliver if you're going to build. But only build if you think it's a source of differentiation. If you don't, just don't bother. Okay, wait for the hyperscalers to deliver. The other thing is, there's wonderful low-code, no-code technologies like N8N and Microsoft Copilot Studio that you can use to prototype this technology, to get familiar with it. The best clients that I work with are empowering internal people. This is in the finance industry, analysts, to actually use this kind of technology to prototype work that they're doing. This is another big deal. Focus on grunt before the shiny end of ambitious, right? So on the left-hand side, you'll see an autonomous warship, and I'm going to just jump to here. So these are two thought leaders in the industry. Sol B. Rashidi, so she's the chief AI officer for a company called Kira. She is amazing. And she says some of the highest ROI from AI comes from the least glamorous parts of the business. Focus on the stuff that's not glamorous. Another statement by Austin Gray, a really interesting guy. There's been a lot of activity around defense. I don't know if you've seen, but the Pentagon have just paid out, or they've just contracted like $800 million with 4 of the operators, Gemini, Grok, ChatGPT, and Microsoft, I believe, for doing work with agents in their environments to solve this problem of bureaucracy and business systems. So here's a guy who's building autonomous ships, and he's saying it's actually not the problem. Drones, weaponry, ships, the problem is actually process. Okay, apply the same mindset to how you think about which use cases you tackle in your business. Okay, this is a curve that's come up, the Gartner hype curve as well. My guidance here would be my personal feeling on this, because I'm a big believer in this technology, is that curve is a little bit flatter than some of the previous platform shifts. But what you want to be here is a silent achiever. All right, you want to be consistently chipping away, experimenting, doing stuff to get yourself familiar with it. Okay, so what do you want to do in your business and with your people? You want to create a culture of experimentation. Experiment with the technology, play with it. Look for opportunities that are high return and low complexity. And I would advise that you should create what I refer to as an agile execution track. Does everyone in the room know hands up, who knows what agile is? Okay, so quite a few. So it's a term that we use in product development that I've used certainly in my businesses for the last decade, where you build something small, you iterate, you inspect, and then you adapt your approach based on what you've learned, right? So you should use that same, and you should measure everything, right? So that word there, OKRs, uses objectives and key results. It's an agile methodology used by Google and Amazon and Intel and Toyota. I would also guide the people that don't know what an OKR is to have a look at it. But when you experiment, do it in a disciplined way. build organizational context. It's absolutely key. We talked about it earlier, like where are the differentiators? And I think one of the biggest differentiators in this era is going to be execution. It always has been. How do you get to number one, right? It's execution. But in order for you to lever these tools properly, they need to understand your problems, okay? And that's why modeling your workflows, putting things together like standard operating procedures. I know it sounds like a pain in the ass, but get ChatGPT to do it, okay? I'm seeing our customers use ChatGPT to model their SOPs. If you've got SOPs, it better understands your concept, your context. And then going back to tooling, like specifically assistance, if you're on a Microsoft platform as a business or on Google or whatever it is, that should be your first go-to because it's got access to all of your context. And then this very interesting word, orchestration. So it's been talked about earlier. I talk with my clients about owning the first draft and owning the signature because these things do hallucinate. They do deceive, okay? And although they're actually starting to like smash us on creativity, they just don't have the context that we have, right? So when you're engaging with an AI, own the first draft, own the way that you frame the problem, and that's the sort of culture of sequencing that you need to introduce into the business as well. Okay, beware. The risk of stranded cost, okay, so engaging, so that was that idea that I talked about of being agile. So do stuff, experiment. If you're going to build an automation, build it. Build it with a partner that knows what they're doing, or build it yourselves using N8N or Copilot Studio or whatever it is. But make sure that you do it in small increments, okay, so that you mitigate this cost of stranded risk. Note the disruptive effect. So if you're a slightly bigger SME, you're going to see people become super contributors, and they're going to look amazing. Okay? And some of them might actually try to hide it, and that's going to be quite disruptive. Actually, what you want to do is infuse this culture of fluency, as Jason refers to it, across the entire business. Some people aren't going to, so there's a distinction between the use of assistance and what we refer to as agentic AI, okay, which is AI that operates with autonomy, okay, but as one of the speakers said earlier, like my personal experience is that in most cases you need a human in the loop, okay? Otherwise they just head off in a direction. We are going to increasingly have to engage with managing machines, which is why I like the idea of using assistance so much, because it enables you how to actually communicate with one, which is all the management of an agent actually is, okay? But some people aren't going to get there, all right? It speaks to the tribe. And then this last beware is over-reliance, right? Augmentation does not equal taste, okay? You would have heard of AI slop, I'm sure, okay? It can produce some absolutely awful stuff. When I receive stuff that's been emailed to me and I can see it's AI-driven, it like pisses me off. And if that information has been communicated to a customer, it's a problem, right? Because they know. When they see the M dash and they see the way it's put together, they know, all right? So you've got to be cautious of that. And then there's also this issue, a very real issue of hallucination and deception. Cool. So just thinking ahead a little bit, this is a slide by Gianni Giacomelli. So he is a prof at the MIT Center for Collective Intelligence, and he talks about how organizations are going to evolve over time. So where we are now, okay, is that machines are actually doing a lot more, all right? People are starting to adapt processes to leverage the fact that we've got this resource that's allowing us to do much more with much less, which means that we can do more, but ultimately we're going to do things that don't exist today. So often one of the things that I encounter is what's the difference between automation and generative AI? And it's a misunderstanding. Generative AI has just expanded the universe of things that we can do in an automation context, okay? So what he envisages, and I absolutely agree, and we're going to have to do it because we've basically, to Jason Goldberg's point earlier, cognition, intelligence has been commoditized, right? It's gone to a marginal cost. So we're going to have to figure out new stuff to do, all right? And we will. That's what we've always done. This is quite an interesting slide. I will also share it later, but if you want to take a picture of the slide, please go ahead, which by the same guy, Gianni. And it's a way of how do you actually think about jobs and design of jobs, and he differentiates between augmentation potential and automation potential. Okay, and I'm going to let you actually, rather than talk through it, I'm going to let you digest it. But the essence of it is, let's take one example, right? Something that's got low automation potential but high augmentation potential, there should be a human there, all right, that you leverage in. And there's different variations in it. But I actually found this is a very powerful way of working with my clients for how they think about job design. And then as everything changes, some things don't, right? And seismic shifts require grounding in human truths. And I love this. I'm sure many of you have read it, quote by Maya Angelou, that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they will never forget how you feel. And in this era, when we are seeing the tsunami and there's going to be a lot of trauma, like in some ways it actually reminds me of COVID, you know, and I actually believe it's going to be more disruptive than that. You've got to align with your people. And so it comes full circle, right? What an incredible front row. It's why I'm wearing my green shirt. You know, I'm eating my own dog food. But it comes full circle. You've got to align with your frontline team. At the end of the day, that's what I liked about the previous speaker. At the end of the day, it actually comes down to leadership, right? And doing all of these things. But you've got to align with this team, okay? Because they are absolutely fundamental to your success. So the slide that I'll leave you with is, in the age of AI, humans are called upon to be more human, but we need to figure out what that means, because intelligence has been such an important part of our identity, all right? And I find this often, like when I'm working with assistants, when I'm working with companies, often I'm like, I just need to get out of the way of the model. I keep pushing myself into the model, but sometimes you actually, and you need to learn to do that, and there's a discipline, and you only build that muscle by working on it. And that's me.